And a live picture on your screen now from Denver. That is the Sheraton Denver Hotel, I should say. As you can see, the Libertarian Party convention, a presidential candidates debate scheduled to get underway in just a couple of minutes. The Libertarian Party holding its convention this weekend in Denver. It will select its presidential nominee. And over the next 2 hours, we'll bring you this live debate amongst a number of the candidates, which include former Congressman Bob Barr and former Senator and Democratic presidential candidate Mike Gravel. They'll follow this debate with a debate among candidates to be chairman of the Libertarian Party. We'll have continuing coverage here all weekend on C-SPAN, part of our Campaign 2008 coverage. In fact, I think you can see, there's former Senator Gravel there. We saw a moment ago before we came on the air live from Denver, former Congressman Bob Barr. So they are in the convention hall, and we expect this coverage to get underway shortly. We'll remind you that we're back again tomorrow morning from Denver live at 10:30 Eastern, where we'll hear from 2 Libertarian office holders from Colorado, and that will be followed by the convention selection of a presidential candidate. Live coverage continuing here on C-SPAN. Let's watch and listen for a moment as some of the convention goers make their way into the ballroom.
Nationally televised Libertarian presidential debates. We have an exciting evening featuring 7 of our leading Libertarian presidential candidates. And tonight your moderator is going to be James P. Pinkerton. Mr. James Pinkerton Jim has served on the 1980, 84, 88, and 92 Republican presidential campaigns. He has also served He has also served as the domestic policy aide for Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Oh, come on, guys. Since 1993, he has been a columnist for Newsday. He has been a contributing editor. There you go. A contributing editor for the Fox News Channel, a contributing editor for American Conservative Magazine, and a fellow for the New America Foundation. Please give a warm welcome to Jim Pinkerton.
Thank you very much. I actually attended the 1980 Libertarian Convention in Los Angeles, which I seem to recall was the best vote getter ever. I won't take credit, but anyway, listen, you're not here to see me at all. Let me just tell you how this debate is going to go. We are going to bring in the 7 candidates, and then I'll give you a little bit on the rules. So let me get right to it, though. First, former Congressman Bob Barr, Republican of Georgia. Okay. Second, former Democratic Senator from Alaska, Mike Gravel. Okay. Third, Dr. George Phillies, Professor of Physics at Worcester Polytech in Massachusetts. Fourth, Michael Jingozian, an internet marketer, software developer, and longtime libertarian activist. Fifth, Dr. Mary Ruwart, a biochemist. I guess I don't need to tell you that she was also the author of Healing Our World, the other piece of the puzzle. Okay. Sixth, Steve Kubby, a cancer survivor, medical marijuana activist, and notable for Prop 215 in California. Okay. And last but not least, Wayne Allyn Root, in the opinion of some, the king of Las Vegas. Okay. Again, thanks to all the candidates for coming up here. Okay. And please have a seat. And we've tried to minimize the complexity of the rules and so on. So we're going to make this really simple as we can. Each of the candidates is going to get a 2-minute opening statement, and we'll go in the order that they were introduced. Then I will ask, after those statements are concluded, I'll ask each of the candidates the same question. They'll each have 1 minute to answer. That we'll go through as many times as we can. Now again, as you know, you're all asked to submit questions, and I had the privilege of going through them, and I saw more imagination and energy and passion in all those questions, including the V for Victory guy down there. So I just simply had to go through and cull them down into some reasonable number. I know all of you have opinions and energy and activism and so on, but the more applauding and carrying on you do during the questions, that means the fewer of the questions there'll be time to ask, because C-SPAN is calling the tune here, and so we have exactly 2 hours. So please hold all your response. You all get a chance to vote tomorrow on who you like and make your opinions felt there. So please give everybody a chance to do the maximum amount of talking and answering there. We have a time system. We have Barb and Emily here who are holding up signs you can all see as to how they go. You're going to get at 1 minute, you're going to get a notification, and then at 30 seconds, and then at 10 seconds, and then at 5 seconds, and then at red, look, yeah. I don't even want to tell you what happens if you keep talking after the red zone, but just look carefully below you. So, anyway, listen, a lot of the questions were fun. I mean, for example, will you plan on keeping Air Force One, or will you fly commercial? Will you replace the U.S. Secret Service with Smith & Wesson? If elected, will you pardon Michael Vick? But I thought I did my best to pick questions that I think are fair. If there's any complaints, they come to me, not to the candidates, because none of them, these have been sealed hermetically in Funkin' Wagnall's jar since about 6 o'clock tonight. So let's get straight right to it. First off, Congressman Barr, and then we'll go down the list. What philosopher most closely represents your views?
First of all, it's a wonderful honor and a pleasure to be here this evening with such a fine, distinguished audience of libertarians and with such a fine and distinguished panel here and moderator. Probably without a doubt, the one philosopher, and I think I speak probably for an awful lot of us here, that best represents, and as a matter of fact, was instrumental in a step along my way to becoming a libertarian many years ago, is the one and the only best philosopher of the 20th century, Ayn Rand.
All right. You know, I didn't give them their opening statements. We're just gonna. Okay. Well, the moderator took about 8 minutes to make a mistake. I'll tell you what, Congress, let's just. as Mayor LaGuardia said, when I rarely make mistakes, but when I do, it's a beaut. Let's just go back and do the opening statements. I apologize. So, Congressman Barr, let's start with you on the opening statements.
Well, I did sort of notice that, but one of the rules that I've learned over the years, one of the laws of being in a debate is you never correct the moderator, because he or she is in charge of the operation here. But as I started out in the answer to the question, it is indeed a tremendous honor and a pleasure being here. The journey that I took to this epicenter of the Libertarian movement technically may have begun just a number of 100 miles away from here in the city of Atlanta, which I call home. But the fact of the matter is that my journey here, as the journey for many of you, has taken many years in fits and starts, but it has gotten us here today. One of the places, as I already mentioned also, one of the things that began my journey to the libertarian philosophy, the philosophy of freedom, the philosophy of liberty, and the plans that we all share to move that dream forward, was Ayn Rand. But much more than that, friends, I have lived in societies where there is indeed no freedom. I have worked in institutions where there is so little understanding of liberty that pieces of legislation routinely are brought up and unfortunately far too frequently passed without any concept, without any understanding of liberty, indeed of the Constitution. And I speak, of course, of that fudge factory on the Potomac, the Congress of the United States of America. Friends, there was an article written in a magazine just a couple of days ago that talked about my being here with you. And it paid me the compliment of saying I am uncharismatic. Well, I may be uncharismatic. Some folks say I don't smile enough. But I tell you, whether I'm charismatic or not, inside this heart beats the heart of a libertarian. It is an honor to be here, and it will be an honor to represent you in the presidential race this year. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Gravel, your opening statement.
The United States of America is at a very, very important juncture. Our nation is in great difficulty, and we're in a mess. And to expect that the people who brought us to this state are the ones that can fix it is really wishful thinking. There's only one party that can do it. The Libertarian Party, a party of liberty and freedom, is what can correct the problems that we have in this country with more freedom, more liberty. The two major parties have a monopoly on politics and on the government. And they've brought us to this point. And they are now raising unbelievable sums of money. And I would ask the American people, follow the money if you want to find out what's going to happen in next year if they are reelected. It will be more of the same. More war, more economic difficulties where people enrich themselves on Wall Street at an obscene level, and the average American can't even make ends meet with energy doubling. And so the military-industrial complex today has been warned by Dwight Eisenhower that this would someday kill our democracy. It was a warning from him. It's now a fact that we are ruled lock, stock, and barrel by the financial industry on Wall Street, by the military-industrial complex, and there's only one way to break that hammerlock, and that is to realize what the Libertarian Party offers to the American people, and that is freedom, freedom, freedom.
Please restrain your applause to the extent you can. Dr. Phillies.
Fellow delegates, I'm proud to be a libertarian. I'm proud to have the opportunity, if I'm your candidate, to take our message to the American people. That's the message: peace, liberty, prosperity. That's the message. Vote Libertarian. Get Uncle Sam out of your pocketbook and out of your bedroom. He doesn't belong there.
Okay.
I'm proud to have had many opportunities to serve our party. I was our presidential candidate not before. I did, however, run for Congress in 1998. We had a dozen debates. The press said I won them. I formed PACs. I've had political action committees, and my political action committees proudly support libertarian candidates, people who run under our banner. I'm state chair of the Massachusetts Party. We're hard at work on ballot access. So what are my messages to you? Number one, make me our candidate, and I will talk to the American people about our issues, issues they care about. Ending the war on Iraq already, restoring fiscal sanity to Washington, restoring civil liberties. Why can I do that? Well, you know, we're divided. We have some left-wing sort of libertarians. We have some other libertarians. I'm the centrist libertarian. I'm the man who can hold our party together so we can win. And why do we have an opportunity to do that? We have that opportunity because the George Bush conservatives have exposed conservatism for what it is, a philosophy of bigotry, a philosophy of incompetence, a philosophy that has failed America time and time and time again. Make me our candidate, give me our nomination, and I will give us the campaign we've always dreamed of.
Mr. Jingozian.
Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be in a room with so many people who are concerned about liberty and freedom. You know, 1980, so much has happened in the world since then. We've seen the fall of the Soviet Union, the birth of the information age, and countless governments come and go. It was about that time I realized that our nation, controlled by the two-party system, could follow the same fate. It's the year I became a libertarian, and though so much has happened in the world since then, my libertarian values, my love and concern for this country has always been a constant. And that's why I've been on the road for the last 5 years. That's why, at a time in my life when I could experience the American dream, I've been on the road, talking to my kids on the phone long distance, while speaking face to face with hundreds and thousands of Americans who feel as passionate about this country as I. And that's why I've sacrificed so much of my own time and money. And that's why I'm seeking our nomination for President of the United States. Thank you.
Dr. Ruwart.
The Democrats have made this the year of the woman. They've gotten a lot of excitement in the female population about voting for a woman at the top of the ticket. And then they've dropped the ball. A ball we can pick up and should pick up, because certainly the woman the Democrats had proposed for the top of the ticket cannot compare, I believe, to a principled libertarian woman in that position. Now, perhaps you will decide that I am that woman. And to give you some idea of how I would run this campaign, I'd like to reassure you that I have 25 years of libertarian campaign experience. And that experience allows me to explain to the American public why liberty is the compassionate choice, how liberty can save the poor, keep the environment clean, decrease crime, slash healthcare costs, and do all the things that politicians promise but never deliver. And they never will be able to deliver them because only liberty can. And that is the message that I would take on our behalf to the American people. I believe that I have the experience and the depth of understanding of our principles to do a very good job of this. And if you agree, I hope you'll make me your nominee and help me take this message to the American people. Thank you.
Mr. Kubby.
Well, I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that the doctors tell me I have as little as 6 months to live. I have one of the most aggressive and invasive forms of cancer that there is, and it's called adrenal cancer. Each cancer cell also produces deadly amounts of adrenaline. The good news is that this is the 34th year that they've been telling me that. And I want you to know that medical marijuana is the only medicine that I use. I've been through chemotherapy and radiation and surgeries and everything else. Only medical marijuana has worked for me. But if you think that my candidacy or my story is about marijuana, it's no more about marijuana than the Boston Tea Party was about tea. It's about liberty. And I have fought hard for liberty. I have nearly died for liberty. I have gone to jail for liberty. I have fought with every cell in my body for liberty. And you know, most of the people I talk to cannot even define liberty. They say, well, it's freedom. No, it's freedom from government. It's the freedom to live as you want, to not be investigated, prosecuted, harassed, not have the government going into your pocketbook and your medicine cabinet and your bedroom. Real liberty is what is going to make this country prosper. Real, honest-to-goodness liberty, without restrictions, without restraints, but an understanding that your liberty ends at where the other person's life begins. This is the credo of the Libertarian Party. This is the principle upon which we all agree, and this is why I'm running and seeking your nomination. Thank you.
Mr. Root.
Hi everyone, I'm Wayne Allyn Root, and I think I've got the perfect image for this anti-establishment, anti-Washington DC insiders, anti-status quo, anti-tax, anti-government party. I'm a small businessman with 35 employees. I run my business while I run for office. I'm a homeschool dad of 4 young children, including a brand new baby, my 5-month-old daughter, Contessa. I'm an SOB, a son of a butcher, and I think this party needs an SOB. I think this country needs an SOB. And most of all, I'm a citizen politician. Add it up, and what you've got is the anti-politician. I'm going to make history for this party this year. If you're kind enough to give me your nomination, we have news to make. Number one, it'll be the first time in history that a small businessman gets a presidential nomination for a major party. First time in modern political history. First time in modern history that a homeschool dad will get a nomination for President of the United States. I will be the first ever Jewish American to get a nomination of a major party for President of the United States. I will be the first ever nominee from the state of Nevada, my home state. And let me tell you something about Nevada. The difference between Las Vegas and Washington, D.C. is pretty simple. In Las Vegas, the drunks gamble with their own money, not your money. And last but not least, I'll give you one more dramatic first, an incredible opportunity. My classmate at Columbia University is Barack Obama, class of 1983. It'll be the first time in history 2 college graduates ran against each other. My message is simple. Get out your wallet, look inside, vote for me, and I promise to stay the hell out of there. It's a message America can understand. I have a realistic 16-year plan to win the White House, and for the next 16 years, I'll help libertarians on a local basis win every single possible position. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, candidates. And that completes the round of opening statements. And again, my apologies to both the panel and to the audience. We're going to go back to this question of what philosopher most closely represents your views. Congressman Barr gave his answer earlier. We'll now just then skip right to Senator Gravel.
Most important philosopher in my knowledge is Solon, S-O-L-O-N. He was a Greek philosopher in 595 BC, and what he did is he's the one that brought forth the concept of law. where human beings can agree on the law, and rather than rely upon the tyranny of individuals, you rely upon the law to protect us all. And I think that that is what has sustained civilization since then and to this very day. And so we libertarians are concerned about our sovereignty, and we need to be concerned, but it's laws that permit us to have the protection to realize our full sovereignty, nothing else.
Okay. Thank you. Same question to Dr. Phillies, and I remind the panel, although Senator Gravel didn't go over, that we have 1 minute for all these answers.
The philosopher who most obviously brought me here was actually a politician, Barry Morris Goldwater, the man who integrated the Arizona National Guard. But I tell you, if Barry Goldwater were alive today, he'd be someplace in front of me cheering for all of us. And he'd have his book on sale, but the new editions would have one word different: The Conscience of a Libertarian, because he was a libertarian. However, the philosopher that really sustains me when I came here is someone who lived 2,000 years ago. He was a Roman, Marcus Tullius Cicero. Most of you probably haven't heard of him. His most important writing was a single essay which you could imagine having someone memorize: the essay on duty, sacrifice on occasion for your country, for your place, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Jingozian.
It would have to be Benjamin Franklin, who once said, change can only come from one direction, outside. Now, as much as these Democrats and Republicans talk about change, because that's what the American people want is change, it's not going to happen from the two-party system that profits and benefits from the status quo. The only chance we have to save this country, the only chance we have to change this dangerous trajectory that we're on, is to vote for libertarian candidates in 2008 and 2012. This is the year of the libertarian. This is the year that people want that change, and this is the year that we can put the Libertarian Party on the map.
Dr. Ruwart, and I remind the issue is the philosopher that most influenced you.
Well, there's something special about your first love and the first person who introduces you to the libertarian philosophy. So I would have to say the most important philosopher for me was Ayn Rand. Now, even though I admire her greatly for what she did for me, introduced me to the philosophy of liberty. Like many great people, like us all, we all have flaws, and the one that she had that's influenced us the most, I think, is the concept of judge and be prepared to be judged. This is something that has threatened the unity of our party for a long time. And this is something that I think we are really beginning to see and change. There are too many out there who don't know about the message of liberty, and too few of us in here who do. For us to be united, we need to practice our own philosophy and honor our neighbor's choice. Not just practice tolerance, which our party is about, but practice non-judgment and love, because that is what it is. Thank you.
Mr. Kubby.
Well, a long list of philosophers have influenced me, going all the way back to Lao Tzu. But I would have to say that the philosopher that has impressed me and taught me the most is the founder of the Libertarian Party, David Nolan. David taught me that liberty works, that with liberty, everything else follows. Without liberty, your country, your family, your life is in jeopardy. It's about liberty, and that's the message that I learned from David Nolan. Thank you, David.
Mr. Root.
I would say that my favorite philosopher would probably be Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra once said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And when I think about politics in America, when you choose the Republican Party, you've got to be all right-wing and conservative. When you choose the Democratic Party, you've got to be all left-wing and liberal. The only party that lets you come to the fork in the road and take it, that is fiscally right and socially tolerant, is the Libertarian Party. And second of all, I'd have to say Barry Goldwater was the greatest influence in my life. I'd agree with Dr. Phillies, and I'll tell you why. I'll end with this one. Barry Goldwater says the greatest politician in America will be the one that takes the oath of office, and on that day, at the moment they're taking it, they look at the American people and say, from this moment on, I work to give the power back to you, the people. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to our second round of questions, and this time we'll work our way across and then go through as many cycles as we can. I will begin with Senator Gravel, and then we'll go along. Senator Gravel, Libertarians believe in a non-interventionist foreign policy. Are there any parts of the world where you would send U.S. troops, and how would you justify this?
No, I don't see any part of the world. I don't see enemies out there. I think we create our enemies. And so if we began to treat everybody as equals, then we would see a fundamental difference. I want to withdraw American troops from the 130 countries where we have them. I want to close the 725 bases that we have out there. I want to get the troops out of the Middle East. We don't need to be global imperialists. And that's what the leadership of the parties that control our society today, the military-industrial complex, wants wars, needs wars. They make no profit without wars. And so that is the approach that has to be taken. Treat everybody as equals, or the golden rule, treat them as you would want to be treated. That's the answer to a foreign policy that's meaningful.
Dr. Phillies, same question to you.
The Cold War is over. Bring our troops home from overseas. Shut down that chain of bases. Our war on Iraq practically ended years ago. Bring the troops home. Bring the troops home from around the world. If we have groups of pirates someplace, that's a spy problem. The government of China has figured out something very important. Future competitions are not military, because between great powers, military conflict is instant suicide that will simply kill everyone in both countries. What do we do? What is their idea on competition? Engineering, science, industry. Why do they have a 9% growth rate? Well, they may be a commie dictatorship, but they don't regulate their industry very much. We can steal their good idea. They're stealing lots of our ideas, after all. Steal their good ideas and have the same economic growth rate that they do. End the war, end foreign aid, bring troops home, compete economically.
Mr. Jingozian.
I believe that most people in this world have the same concerns as you and I. Just want to live in peace, provide a decent standard of living for our families, and hope our kids have it a little better than us. It's the governments that are at war, not the people. It's the industrial military complex. It's the politicians that want the war. You got Barack Obama raising $250 million. That's a lot of IOUs, my friend. This war is not going to end if we elect a Democrat. The only way we're going to end this war in Iraq, the only way we can pull our troops out of all these nations where we don't belong, the only way we can save our budget is to vote Libertarian in 2008. Thank you.
Dr. Ruwart.
I would bring all of our troops home from overseas, those from Europe, those from Japan, and of course, those from Iraq. Our brave young men and women have offered to lay down their lives for us. All they ask of us is that we don't send them in harm's way unnecessarily. Instead, we've sent them to a Middle Eastern Vietnam. This is not a wise expenditure of our dearest blood. If we want peace with other nations, the secret is trade. We were at war with Japan just a few decades ago. Now we would not dream of attacking them or they us, because our economies are intertwined in trade, even though it's not totally free. This is the way to proceed, to be friends to all, to trade with all, and to offer a hand in friendship, not to send our troops over, because we believe that even with thousands and thousands of innocent deaths, that we can somehow avenge ourselves.
Mr. Kubby.
The United States does not have enemies. We have no enemies in this world. We have competitors. We have people that are competing against us ideologically, economically, in every possible way. And we need to figure out that bombing civilian populations isn't going to help. We need to understand that people look to the United States as a leader, as someone that sets the bar higher, as someone that shows the entire world how liberty works, how free enterprise and free markets work. This is how we will achieve success in the world markets, not through bombing people, but through spreading the gospel of liberty. Thank you.
Mr. Root.
Well, my hero, I kind of look to my hero, is President Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is the president that came up with the idea of impoundment. And I'll tell you what that means. If it isn't authorized by the Constitution, we have no right to spend the taxpayers' money. And Thomas Jefferson decided in the early 1800s that when Congress appropriated $50,000 for naval gunships, it was not authorized by the Constitution. He seized the money, or impounded it, and gave it back to the taxpayers. That's my kind of role model. Thomas Jefferson also said no foreign entanglements. I'm the one in this panel that has come the farthest. I've been an economic libertarian my entire life. But when it comes to war, I'll admit it. I was a pro-war guy 5 years ago. And you know what I came to realize? If you're against government waste, government spending, higher taxes, if you're against corporate welfare or welfare for the individual, the biggest waste of money is in the military defense budget. Let's cut it and give the money back to the taxpayers.
And the same question to Congressman Barr.
Thank you, Jim. We have a Department of Defense. We have a national defense policy. But what's missing in our Department of Defense and what's missing in our national defense policy is an emphasis on the word defense. It is not a defensive policy. It is not defending the United States of America to do what candidate George W. Bush said we should not do, and that is to occupy foreign nations. We are doing that today. We are trying to build a nation in our image in the Middle East. Hasn't worked in the past, isn't going to work now. We need to bring those troops home, remove the security and economic security blanket that is propping up a foreign regime, put that money back in the hands of the American people where it belongs and where it should have been in the first place. And we need to do the same thing from Japan to Korea to Australia. You name it, we have troops there. We don't need them there. We need to defend this nation. Somebody attacks us, by God, we go after them and we defend ourselves, but we do not use that defense policy offensively because it is offensive.
And for the third round of questions, we'll start with Dr. Phillies. How would you use your power to remove restrictions on the discovery and development and production of all forms of energy, especially construction of new oil refineries and nuclear power plants?
First of all, the power of the president to do things is very limited. We're a constitutional republic. There are lots of things that only Congress can do. Second of all, I've called for an intelligent program to advance renewable energy in the United States. I've asked Congress, hey, we're going to buy electricity, right? Let's buy it in long-term, fixed-price contracts. You know it's going to go up and we'll save money for energy from new renewable sources, solar, wind, nuclear pretty much. I'm not going to give you promises about drilling for oil to solve our foreign oil demand. By drilling for oil, we'd have to find 2 Saudi Arabias inside the USA. That's not going to happen. Our energy solution, our future, is either nuclear energy or renewable energy, and I'll ask Congress to make the change and buy that way and take off silly regulations that prevent it. And then I ask private enterprise to do the hard work.
Mr. Jingozian.
I agree with Dr. Phillies. As President of the United States, there are some things you are capable of doing, and there are some things you're not capable of doing. But one thing you are capable of doing is being a leader we can start an aggressive energy conservation program across this country. This will decrease our energy costs, and it will put more money in the hands of the American families who need this money now. I'm also opposed at this time towards drilling in the Arctic, because we depend on petroleum for far more than just energy. In fact, energy use is the most inefficient use of petroleum. We have thousands of products that are made from petroleum, and once this runs out, it's not just an energy issue, but it's a serious, serious raw material and commodity issue. Ladies and gentlemen, the only way we're going to change this political system is to not vote for Democrats or Republicans, vote outside the two-party system, vote Libertarian in 2008. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ruwart.
Well, the president can do some things, and one of the things they can do is to stop using our troops to protect foreign oil, or oil that we believe is part of our American interests. Now, what that would do is it would put the true cost of oil at market price. You see, and today we really don't know what the true cost of oil is because we pay at the pump and then we pay in our taxes. If we knew the true cost of oil, we pay it anyway. Remember, we pay it in taxes or we pay it at the pump, but we don't see what we pay in taxes, and so we have the illusion that oil is cheap, and we waste it. And also, we look at alternative fuels and think that they're expensive because they are not subsidized in that way. If the president would stop putting our troops out there in harm's way in order to bring us oil, we would probably very quickly go to alternative fuels. The marketplace would give us that price signal, and that's the best way to make it come about. Thank you.
Mr. Kubby.
Well, I have a bold, new, even novel concept for how I would govern as president, something that we really haven't seen for a long time in this country. I'd walk my talk. I'd lead by example. I drive a car right now, a 1984 Mercedes 300D turbo diesel. I bought it for $2,300. I've been fixing it up. It runs on oil that I buy, cooking oil that I buy for $1.79 a gallon. No terrorists get any money from me. My money goes to farmers. My money stays in the community. And as president, I would urge my fellow Americans to think for themselves. Don't depend on the government. Figure out what's going to work best for you and do it. We need a president that will set an example for the whole country. That's what I will do.
Politicians aren't the solution. They're the problem. Get the politicians out of the situation. Get the free market in. Let me give you an example. Ethanol. Politicians chose a winner. They decided ethanol was the answer to our energy problems. What we've got now is skyrocketing gas prices and skyrocketing grocery prices. Ethanol has turned out to be a disaster. Way too costly. It does not work. Global warming. Do you know that Al Gore's mentor, a famous professor in 1969 at Earth Day, predicted that global cooling would destroy our planet in 30 years? He said by the year 2000, 200 million Americans would have starved to death because of global cooling. The answer is get the politicians out and let the free market lead the way. Drill in Alaska, drill in Anwar, drill off the Gulf of Mexico, drill off Florida, drill off California, more energy from nuclear, more energy from clean coal, and more refineries, and it's the best thing for America. Thank you.
The same question on energy to Congressman Barr and then Senator Gravel.
Nothing against polar bears. I like to go to the zoo and watch the polar bears, and our kids and grandkids love to go to the zoo and look at the polar bears. But frankly, friends, I think that the ability for our nation to survive and excel, and for businesses to survive and excel, lies not in putting on the endangered species list another species that is not endangered, but in freeing up what used to be the most dynamic, willing to take risk economy and series of businesses in this world's history, and that is the American economy. Yet what is standing in the way of it? Bureaucrats, regulations, laws, policies that have failed over and over and over again in Washington. Yet what do? We do what Albert Einstein said is the definition of insanity. We keep doing the same thing over and over again, yet hoping for a different result. Well, we need a different result, not by hoping for something, but by doing it. Get government out of it and put business back in.
Senator Gravel.
I wish it were that simple. I really do. Just get government out and all good things are going to happen. You know, 30 years ago, we had the same crisis we have right now. And the government did nothing, no leadership. The auto industry, they decided to make these big automobiles, these clunkers that are using all this gasoline. Let me make you a pledge. We can get off of gasoline in 5 years if we have a national commitment. Then it takes leadership to bring this about. We say, how could you do that? Well, here, what did we do in the Second World War? We went from a dead stop in 1941, and 3 years later, we were producing more than the entire world could handle, and we did it for our defense. We are in that serious a problem today. You're going to pay through the nose as a nation. You just got to make your mind up. Are you going to pay it to the Arabs, or are you going to pay it for American enterprise? Thank you.
And for the fourth question, we'll begin with Mr. Jingozian. And the question is a little on the broader subject of environmentalism and so on. Are you familiar with the concept called the tragedy of the commons? And does the atmosphere constitute a commons? And then perhaps in the same, your grand total of a minute, whatever else you might say about the global environment and what libertarians should think about that.
Thanks, Jim. I'm going to tell you something that you're probably not going to hear from a politician. I don't know. You know, I'm successful in my business and my career not because I have all the answers, but because I know how to ask the right questions to the right people. I fully admit that Dr. Phillies here knows more about energy than I do. Dr. Ruwart knows more about healthcare than I do. I would enroll them into our campaign. We need to work together, my friends. We need a president who is willing to acknowledge what he doesn't know. We have to learn from other people. We have to learn from other countries that suffer the same problems that we do. We could learn from Europe and from the UK and Holland, who are dealing with issues like drugs and prostitution. We can learn from other countries and not have this attitude like it's our way or it's no way at all. Thank you.
Dr. Ruwart.
I think these questions all amount to this. What do we do in a libertarian society if someone pollutes our atmosphere? Libertarians believe in restitution. They believe if you throw garbage on your neighbor's yard, you've got to pick it up. And that's a pretty heavy price to pay when you're talking about the environment. If we put polluting chemicals into the air, then we must pay the price. And even when it's not a point source, there are ways to make that happen. You could have taxes. I wouldn't use taxes per se, but what I would do is use some type of fee to cover the damage. And in a private situation where we have private roads in a libertarian society where this would happen, it would be the road company that would pay this fine, if you will, for restitution, for compensating the victims around them. And then it could be passed on to the users of that road in order to help alleviate the problem. This would provide great incentive for people to stop polluting. And as you know, especially in the area of cars, about 80% of this pollution is done by 20% of the vehicles.
Mr. Kubby.
Well, my green friends and I have animated discussions about the environment. And I always listen carefully, but I always hear the same thing. When they get all done, I ask them, you want the United States government to be in charge of the environment? They're the biggest polluters on the planet. I don't get it. That's like having the fox guarding the chicken coop. I'm a libertarian. The only way that I would accept that is if the chickens are armed. Then it's a libertarian society. Now, I'm going to give you some quick examples. We had a terrible thing happening in our environment with tuna harvesting, killing porpoises. We didn't have to issue regulations. We didn't have to make laws. We just had to inform the consumer, and the consumer sent a message to the free marketplace and said, we will not stand for this, and we will not buy your products. That's the solution.
Mr. Root.
Mr. Kubby's right. The biggest polluter in the world is the U.S. government. Do you know who the second biggest polluter is? Al Gore. Every time he gets in his private airplane to accept the Nobel Peace Prize, he creates more pollution than I do in my entire lifetime in my car. 25,000 square foot house uses up more electricity than most cities. The people in Hollywood that ride limousines and private jets that scream all day about global warming and the environment are the biggest hypocrites in the world, and the only people worse are government bureaucrats. Let me give you the second half. It also involves California, one of my favorite states. In California, if you drive a new car that doesn't pollute, and it costs a lot of money because it's new and it doesn't pollute, they give you a car registration tax. You pay $2,000 a year for your car. Isn't government brilliant? But if you drive an old junker that pollutes and burns gas at a high rate, they give you maybe $50 for a car registration tax. They're giving you an incentive to pollute. Government is a failure.
Congressman Barr, same question.
Now, the problem is actually worse than just what government is doing. It's a problem that has infected the world, and the solution from some of our great leaders in Washington, such as one Senator John McCain, is to turn the matter over to the international bodies. Now, he'd like to turn it over and implement Kyoto, the Kyoto Treaty. Now, I'm not sure whether that has anything at all to do with the question, and I have no idea what the question was about to begin with. It was asked so long ago. But I tell you, anybody that thinks that we can solve our problems in this country by forcing the Kyoto Treaty or the Kyoto Protocol or the Kyoto, whatever you want to call it, on the American people, on American businesses, on the businesses and the governments of our state and local governments is absolutely crazy. I want us to solve our problems, not the bureaucrats on the bank of the East River in the United Nations.
As the moderator, I'm very grateful that even if the panelists don't understand the questions, they're still able to confine their answers to 1 minute. Senator Gravel.
On this particular issue, the Libertarians have a real advantage. It's really the concept of private property that we hold so dear. And if we could really honor that concept and permit people to sue the polluters who invade their lives one way or another, that's the answer. Now the problem is, it's the government that responds to these 30,000 lobbyists in Washington who set up barriers so the citizens can't really get out there and sue the violators that are polluting them. And that's the change that has to take place. And so that's where the Libertarian Party does have an edge in addressing this problem, not only for the individual property owners, but for the commons. It sets the stage for a new approach, and that's why it's so important for the American people to realize what the Libertarian Party offers to them. Freedom, freedom, freedom.
Dr. Phillies.
I'm running to be president of all Americans. I'm not going to bash people just because they happen to be conservatives or liberals or even government employees, because they're all our fellow Americans. We have a great problem we're facing. Between liberal and conservative, questions that are questions of scientific fact have been turned into political arguments where if you're a conservative, you're required to believe, God knows, the earth is not getting warmer, and if you're a liberal, you have your own set of equally silly issues. What's my answer? Scientific truth. Even 30 years ago, the overwhelming majority of the scientific community agreed we have global warming. We have CFCs wrecking the ozone layer. Suing people is not always the answer. If someone throws gasoline on my house, pollution, and then a match, I don't want to sue them. I want them tossed in prison, and that goes just the same for people who want to throw CFCs into the atmosphere.
The next question will begin with Dr. Ruwart. And again, I admire the ingenuity of the questioners here. They could pack in a couple hours worth of answers into two brief questions. Part A, how would you deal with the Patriot Act? And Part B, how would you deal with the Real ID Act?
I would abolish them both. From day one, there were a few Americans who understood what the Patriot Act was all about and fought against it. One was Representative Ron Paul. Another was myself, and most libertarians. We understand that if you can take liberties away in the name of security, that you have no security at all. It is liberty that makes us secure. It is liberty that gives us the prosperity to arm ourselves. It is liberty that allows us the freedom to choose competing ways of defending ourselves. And after 9/11, when things were so terrible, people went out and bought firearms. And had we promoted that, we would now have militias that could protect us. Had our pilots carried, we might not have had a 9/11 at all.
Mr. Kubby.
Well, thank you, Jim. One of the signers, one of the supporters of the Patriot Act was Bob Barr, and I'm glad that Bob Barr is in the party. I'm glad that he has renounced the Patriot Act. I'm not really clear what Bob Barr's position is on the Patriot Act now and on Real ID, but I know that as a libertarian, we recognize that these are determined, rather cynical ways that the government has come up with to track us and to control us. Those little IDs that they're talking about will track you wherever you go. The government thinks that that's an important thing for them to be doing. Libertarians think that that is absolutely one of the worst things that government could be doing. So we need to set clear limits for the government and tell them that their government stops at our property line. Thank you.
Mr. Root.
Well, the Patriot Act and warrantless wiretaps is probably the single biggest and most significant events that turned me into a libertarian. I realized at that moment that our government was corrupt. I realized at that moment that how can you fight a war in Iraq to give freedom to the Iraqi people at the same time, supposedly, at the same time as you're taking away the freedoms of the American people. So the Patriot Act, gone. Warrantless wiretaps, gone. Real ID, do you think I put in the hands of bureaucrats our valuable information and financial information and ID in the hands of the same bureaucrats at the Veterans Administration that lost one laptop and 30 million American information and names were lost? No way, Jose. Out. Last but not least, the war on terror, how do you win it? You privatize it. You put it in the hands of America, business, and capitalists, and get it out of the hands of government bureaucrats.
Congressman Barr.
Jim, I don't know whether everybody here read the newspaper 2 days ago, the Denver Post. I think it was left in all of our rooms here at the hotel. But at the beginning of the second section of that, there was a picture of a full-body X-ray scanner that they're starting to use here at Denver International Airport. That is yet another manifestation of what is happening in Washington when since fear has become the driving force behind all public policy in our country. What would I do about the Patriot Act, Steve? I'll tell you not just what I would do about the Patriot Act, but what I've been doing against the Patriot Act for the last 5 years working with a broad coalition of folks from the ACLU to the ACU and the Libertarian Party and everything in between. And that is working to take the USA Patriot Act, drive a stake through its heart, shoot it, burn it, cut off its head, burn it again, and scatter its ashes to the four corners of the world, and then we'll take what the real problem is and to use the laws and the legitimate power the government has to stop these people, and we don't need the Real ID Act as part of that bargain either.
Senator Gravel.
This is a no-brainer for libertarians. Obviously, we should do away with the Patriot Act. Obviously, we don't need an ID to be controlled the way they're trying to control us. No, but you got to keep in mind, now, this was put in place by a Republican Congress. It was sustained by a Democratic Congress. And so the question I ask you very simply, who do you think is going to stop it? Who do you think is going to stop it? We won't control in the next 2, 3, 4 years the Congress of the United States. We hope we'll have an impact, but we won't control it. You have to ask the American people, do you want to end the Patriot Act? Do you want to stop wiretapping? Do you want the government to get out of, as they say, your wallet in your bedroom? If the people had the power to make laws and to repeal laws, they could do it in a heartbeat. And that's what we represent, is the ability to have Americans use their power to decide on all the issues that affect their lives. It's called the National Initiative for Democracy.
Dr. Phillies.
I'm going to treat it as a political opportunity. The conservative police-state parties, the Republicans and their lackeys, the Democrats, arranged to wiretap almost every phone call in the United States. They're reading almost every email you and every other American makes. If I'm elected the presidency, I'll appoint an army of special prosecutors so every one of those federal civil servants is brought to trial, given a fair trial, and thrown in prison where they belong, along with all their collaborators. And I'm going to send a message to the American people. We're the party that's loyal to America. We're the party that is the opposite of the conservative police-state party. Elect us, make us the libertarian big majority, and crush conservative police-state candidates down to, gee, maybe this year we'll elect a state legislator. That's what we can do. We've been given the opportunity. Let's take it.
Mr. Jingozian.
How can you not like the Patriot Act? It's got the word patriot in it. You know, our government's, it's a new low when you have to apply deceiving names of legislation just to get it passed. And that's what we're seeing today. I started this movement because of the Real ID Act, as a matter of fact, not to run for president. The reason I'm running for president is to educate the American people about the deliberate and unconscionable loss of our freedoms in the hands of the Democrats and Republicans who benefit and profit by the status quo. And it's ludicrous for us to believe them when they say they want to change the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next round of questions will begin with Mr. Kubby. How does our current immigration policy differ from the open borders policies of the American Indians? Native Americans, if you prefer. Do you believe that their policy was beneficial to them?
I don't know anything about the American Indians' immigration policy, but I do know that the American immigration policy is pretty much the kind of policy that I would expect from the KKK. It's racist, it's prejudice, and it's unproductive. I know people that have tried for nearly a decade to get citizenship for completely legitimate, hardworking people. We are targeting the wrong people. We're making it easier for the bad guys to sneak into this country because there's a whole army of workers that want to come up here that the government is spending all this money and time on, and they can't focus on the real threat. Now We need an immigration policy that is an open and receptive policy that allows workers to come in, make money, leave the country, go back to their country, live as kings with their families. That's what they want. That's what we want.
Mr. Root.
You know, I understand immigration very well because my grandfather and grandmother, Louis and Anna Rutsky, came to America from Russia at the turn of the century. My grandfather died in the poor ward of a Brooklyn hospital and left 7 children and my grandmother with no money, no job, and no insurance. And the result of that is all 7 turned out fantastic without ever accepting welfare, without ever accepting any help from the United States government. Everyone in the family pitched in and got a job. Now, if I could guarantee that every single immigrant would cross the border tomorrow and not accept welfare, aid to dependent families, housing assistance, free schools, free medical, Social Security, then I would say tomorrow, let's open the borders because I love immigrants. I want more of them. They're the lifeblood. But we can't guarantee that. So what I would say is realistically, until we can end welfare in this country and end welfare for immigrants, let's secure the border and provide a secure but fair pathway to citizenship for those who are already here. Thank you.
Congressman Barr.
Jim, the question of comparing America's immigration policy to any other immigration policy is a non sequitur. We have no immigration policy in this country. Yeah, one day they want to build a fence. The next day they want to build a virtual fence. The next day they want to send drones over to take pictures. The next day it's something else. And yet when too many cars back up on the Tijuana, Mexico side of the border wanting to come into the United States, they just wave them through because they don't want the bad publicity that comes from having people sitting there in their cars polluting the air or something. There is no immigration policy. The immigration policy that we need, I don't know whether it applies or whether any other country in the world or any other group of people in the world want to adopt it, is very simple. You require people to come through a legitimate border checkpoint that is manned. You require them to submit to submit basic, verifiable, current identification so we can establish that they do not pose a security risk, and you submit them to a check to make sure they don't pose a communicable disease threat.
Senator Gravel.
No, isn't it interesting when our Congress is appropriating money to build a fence around this supposedly free country of ours, that in Europe, 6 countries lowered all their barriers. You can travel without showing your license from Spain all the way to the Baltic. Now, do they know something we don't know about freedom? Do they? You know, libertarians are for freedom. Freedom means no barriers, no barriers. And these artificial barriers by politicians are really, and the bureaucrats are causing the problem. That is the problem. The solution is if we had an economic policy in this country with the prosperity that would come from a fair tax, you wouldn't have enough people coming in to meet all the employment obligations we need to redo the structure of this country. That's what we should have as an immigration policy. It's made us great. Have the people of the world come over here. That's what we all are. We're the amalgam of the people of the world, and that's why we're a great country.
Dr. Phillies.
I'm going to do something that real politicians don't. I'm actually going to answer the question. The native cultures of North and South America were overwhelmed, destroyed, their descendants locked up on reservations because they had overwhelming foreign visitors. That's true. I look forward, though, to a positive future, a libertarian future in which every country in the world is as free as we are, is as wealthy as we are, and you know what happens then? No one's going to care about immigration policy any more than the Belgians and the Germans now care about cross-border travel, because in the libertarian future it won't matter. Having said that, I also have to say that as long as you have a big welfare system, you can't have open borders. You'll go broke. You really will. We can do better. We should welcome immigrants. That's all we can do.
Mr. Jingozian.
I'm going to add to what Congressman Barr said. He said that we don't have an immigration policy. We don't have an energy policy. We don't have a foreign policy. We have in this country what's called a feel-good legislation policy, a Band-Aid legislation policy. That's what we have in this country. Now, you can't have open borders in a welfare state. I'm not too particular about the Native Americans, but I doubt they had a welfare state. Now, we can try to close the border, but that's not going to work. We need to end the welfare state to protect our economy. Our budget is out of control. The real budget is close to $100 trillion. In fact, if I use the same accounting practices in my business that Congress uses in determining the debt, I'd be in jail for life for accounting fraud.
Dr. Ruwart.
As libertarians, we'd all like to see peaceful people be allowed to cross borders at will. But there's a lot of fear that the American people have, and justifiably so. They're concerned that they're going to lose their jobs to the people that come over. And that's because our government has limited the number of jobs that we have. Every regulator kills about 150 jobs every year in the private sector. And we have so many regulations that are so unnecessary and harm us instead of help us. If we got rid of these regulations, and if we lowered government spending, we would have an increased economy, a stimulation so great that we'd be begging immigrants to come in and take those jobs. There's also a fear that security will be a problem. Yet, Mohammed Atta, the chief hijacker in 9/11, crossed the border with an expired visa. And did the immigration officials track him down? No, they were too busy at the border, preventing peaceful Mexicans from coming across.
The next round of questions will begin with Mr. Root. Do you agree, without reservation, that the war on drugs is morally wrong, terribly harmful, and that no level of government should be prohibiting the use, possession, or production of medical or recreational drugs?
I agree. The war on drugs is a failure. I don't agree drugs are good, but I agree that Americans have a right to choose what to do with their own bodies, in their own homes, with their own lives. Drugs are a nightmare. They're a disaster, but we all have a right to choose what we want to do with our own bodies. So my answer for the war on drugs, well, there's a two-part. There's domestic and there's international. Number one of the answers to solving our problems worldwide is ending the international war on drugs. What other countries do is none of our business. Number two, domestically. There's a long-term plan for a libertarian presidential candidate like me and a short-term realistic plan. Long-term, end the war on drugs. Why? Over 40% of all Americans over the age of 18 admit to having used drugs. Gee, it's been a great success, hasn't it? But the short-term goal is to go after something realistic. Let's get medical marijuana approved, and let's legalize marijuana for all Americans. Thank you.
Congressman Barr.
We have in jail today for drug offenses 10 times more people than we had back in 1980. We are putting in jail in this country tens of thousands to join the hundreds of thousands that are already there, that have been there, some of them for decades, for doing nothing more than simply practicing what they want to do in the privacy of their own home or the privacy of some other location. Clearly, the drug war has not worked. I mean, I've been there. I worked on it in the Congress, worked on it as a U.S. attorney. And I'll tell you from the inside, now looking at it from the outside as a libertarian, it does not work. And I do not subscribe to, as I mentioned earlier, Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. You keep trying the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result. We do need different results, but we get them by different policies, new policies, get the federal government out of it, return it to the people through their states, and then eventually, over the long term, to the people themselves to make those decisions.
Senator Gravel.
Americans have forgotten that Richard Nixon appointed a presidential commission headed up by a Republican governor of Pennsylvania, and that was to study the drug problem. And what did they come up with? They came up with a report, a very fine report, that said that marijuana was not addictive, was not a gateway drug, and that with respect to hard drugs, they should be deregulated, and that we should treat the problem of addiction as a public health problem, which is what it is, rather than a criminal problem. Now, that was put on a shelf, and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, ever since, has waged this war on drugs that cost you, the taxpayers, $50 to $100 billion a year. We've ravaged our inner cities. We have more people in jail than any other country in the world. Are you proud of that as Americans? Vote Libertarian come the fall for change.
Dr. Phillies.
When I was a little boy, television broadcast in living black and white. There were all these neat gangster movies about Prohibition, and my parents taught me actually three things. Number one, Prohibition was a total failure. Number two, no one will ever be stupid to do this again. Fortunately, they also always taught me number three, never underestimate the power of human stupidity. And that meant they got 2 out of 3 right, which is really pretty good. If you don't believe me, ask your teenagers. War on drugs is a total failure. And having said that, it costs $80 billion a year. We have a $500 billion a year on-budget federal budget deficit. We're broke. We can't afford it. I'm sorry you want to run your neighbors' lives for you. We're too broke to afford it. We've got to stop.
Mr. Jingozian.
I agree with all my colleagues here about this issue. I was calling for the prohibition of marijuana for a long time now, and I was speaking to a bunch of libertarians about this last year, and I was educated about the fact that it's not just marijuana we need to legalize. If we really want to control a problem, we need to legalize it. We need to deal with it maturely and honestly. We cannot win this war on drugs. It's impossible. If you were able to prevent all drugs from coming into this country, the price of drugs on the street would soar. As a result, property crime will soar. In my district where I live in Oregon, 90% of property crime is related to meth alone. This is spreading throughout the country. Again, we can learn from our neighbors. The UK, the Netherlands have dealt with this problem in a responsible way. But you're not going to see this from the Democrats and Republicans who are afraid to tackle tough issues and only discuss issues like baseball steroid scandal. First day in office, I pardoned all non-violent drug offenders.
Dr. Ruwart.
The war on drugs kills more people than the drugs themselves, primarily by the spread of AIDS because of shared needles. In addition, if we want to get the pushers out of the schools, we have to take the black market profit out of drugs. The only way to do that is to decriminalize them. When the Netherlands did that, their rate of use dropped. It's now 10 to 20% of what it is in our schools. But it's not just illegal drugs that are a problem. Recently, the cancer patients, terminal cancer patients, sued the US government for permission to get pharmaceuticals that had passed all of the safety testing in animals and first time in man studies so that they would have the opportunity to try to save their lives instead of waiting for the 15-year development time. Do you know what our government told them? There is no constitutional right for you as a dying person to buy these drugs from the pharmaceutical companies who are willing to sell them to you. Who owns your life anyway?
I doubt that he has an opinion, but I'll ask this question of Mr. Kubby anyway.
I'm getting a major buzz right now. I mean, I'm with... I've worked so hard for 10 years, and never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine I'd be up on stage with a former senator, a former congressman, and some leading libertarian politicians all agreeing that the war on drugs need to end and that medical marijuana should be legalized. Now, for those who don't know, I've written 2 books on drug policy reform. I wrote Politics of Consciousness and Why Marijuana Should Be Legal. My friends and I helped write and pass Proposition 215, the vote that was heard around the world. 12 states now copy that law. 2 countries now copy that law. And you know, if I'm president, while I still have a chance, I'm going to pull out Executive Order 13420, end the drug war just as it was created by executive order.
For the next round, we'll swing back to Congressman Barr first. What would be the primary criteria you would use to evaluate any potential nominee to the Supreme Court?
I call up Judge Jim Gray in California and get his advice. Actually, I probably couldn't do that because he would be my first nominee for the United States Supreme Court. But I'd still go to him for advice because this is a man who understands freedom, he understands liberty, and he understands the role of the judiciary in our system. And that is to preserve liberty, to preserve freedom, not to squelch it. He'd be the man we need there, and that would be the criteria I would use for other justices nominees to all levels of federal court. We have to remember there are hundreds of nominees, hundreds of appointees that any president has to make, not just to the Supreme Court, but to the district courts. They're the ones that affect our lives most directly, that put people in jail when they don't need to be there. Courts of appeals judges and Supreme Court judges. That would be the criteria that I would use. That would be the type of person that I would appoint.
Senator Gravel.
Obviously, you'd appoint somebody who's intelligent, knows the law, and could discharge his duties. But more importantly than that, what we need to do is to change our whole judiciary system. We need term limits. Why? These judges are appointed for life. They're papists. They're papists. And what is more corrupting than having power that you can't touch for the rest of your life? That's what we have. Little wonder why our judiciary system is in the mess that it is. We need term limits federally for the president, for the Congress, for the senators, and for the judiciary. And then it'll be easy to appoint these people.
Dr. Phillies.
What do I do as president? I'm chair of our Massachusetts State Party. I phone up a fellow party member, Harvey Silglate, professor of law at Harvard, and I'd ask, send me a list of good libertarian law professors for the Supreme Court, and by the way, include your own name. And I get a good list. And we'd work through, and we'd appoint and promote real civil libertarians. And then I'd put in another criteria, not because they're bad people, but because they've been too involved in the system. If you've been a prosecutor, actually, if you've been a defense attorney of the wrong sort, you're not the right person to be a judge because you've had far too much experience of civil liberties biting you rather than civil liberties defending you. And I would go out and appoint good libertarians from every party. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Constitution, Green, because that's what we need, a nonpartisan judiciary.
Mr. Jingozian.
You know, for a long time we know there's been corruption in the congressional branch of government, and there's been corruption in the executive branch. And there wasn't corruption in the judicial branch for a long time, until recently. Now we're seeing the judicial branch just being as corrupt as the rest of government, and it's spreading into the hidden government, the hundreds of agencies. You know, we think of corruption just in terms of our politicians, but that's not the case. It's the same kind of people as the return for favors and perks that run the FEC, the OSHA, Department of Homeland Security. All of these agencies are run by the same kinds of people that are in government. And the only way to change the system is to replace the Democrats and Republicans with third-party candidates, particularly the Libertarian Party. That's what this message is about. I agree with Gravel, Senator Gravel, about term limits for the judiciary. I agree with all my colleagues here that we need to deal with this issue as we need to do with all these issues. Thank you.
Dr. Ruwart.
Well, I think we all agree that our appointees should be first and foremost libertarians, because libertarians believe in the non-aggression principle. We don't want to initiate force, fraud, or theft against our neighbor. And if we make a mistake, then we want to right our wrongs. These are the principles that we live by in neighborhoods one-on-one. And yet, when we deal group to group, we forget that. Instead of honoring our neighbor's choice, we try to force our neighbor's choice. We try to control our neighbor's choice. And that means that one day our neighbor will try to control us. That is why it is so important, especially in the judiciary, to have someone who understands these principles, who will make sure that our law of the land is upheld. And our law of the land, our Constitution, while not perfect, has come very close to the libertarian ideal. And that's a great starting point. Thank you.
Mr. Kubby.
Jim Gray is a personal friend, and he certainly is an example for all of us of what a good judge should be about. But I question this whole idea that the Supreme Court should lord over us and decide what we get to do and what we can't do, and whether this person should be allowed to do something or that person should be thrown in jail for doing it. Where do they get their authority? They go back to Madison versus Mayberry, where the Supreme Court decided, gee, it would be a good idea if we made these decisions. They didn't have any constitutional authority, and they've given us such great decisions as the Dred Scott case, where they said that slaves are the legal property of their owners. How smart are these guys? You know, they have way too much power, and they're idiots.
I'm actually not sure that Andrew Griffith was involved in that Supreme Court case. But in any case, Mr. Root.
Well, first of all, I'd make sure they follow the United States Constitution as designed by our founding fathers. I'd make sure they're willing to get government out of our lives. I'd make sure they believe in limited government and personal freedoms. And I'd also make sure, most importantly, in the area of education, which is my niche issue, and I believe is the issue if I'm your presidential candidate, the civil rights issue of the 21st century is our right as parents to educate our children in the way we see fit. Whether it's public school, private school, parochial school, homeschool, charter school. Charlton Heston used to talk about guns that way. My daughter is 16 years old. My sons are 7 and 3, and my new daughter, 5 months old. And you're going to tell them what to do and how I should educate them over my cold, dead fingers.
Okay. Thank you. The next round will begin with Senator Gravel. I'm not even going to try and top that. What involvement, if any, Senator Gravel, should the government have with regard to medical care, including the FDA?
One of the things about freedom is that if you don't have any economic sustenance, you're not free. If you're poor and on the street with a cup, you're not free. If you're not healthy, you're not free. And so for us, freedom entails, one, being free, having the least amount of government possible, but it also entails being educated. You know, if you won't have freedom if you have a dumb population. You won't have freedom if you have an unhealthy population. You won't have freedom unless you turn to the people and use their creative ability to address these problems. I've learned with time that I don't know all the answers. And the older I get, the more I know that mission. And so I want to empower the American people so that they can make a decision on education, decision on health care, and a decision on their freedom and how much government they want. And I'll promise you this, you empower the people, they'll shrink the government better than anybody else.
Dr. Phillies.
My campaign promise to you is that I'm going to give answers that Americans will accept to questions that they're interested in. And here we really have a question that frightens millions of Americans. I'm going to propose changes that Americans can understand and support, not ideal answers out of some philosophy text, simple answers they'll buy into. Let's take some examples. Number one, eliminate cost transfers. You go to a hospital, your insurance picks up your medical costs, not the costs of the guy who shows up in the emergency room without insurance. Number two, if the Europeans have approved a drug for medical treatment, there's no requirement that we duplicate the studies, we just bring it in. Number three, interstate competition and medical insurance costs. Number four, I'm now going to go back to the veterans. We are treating our veterans horribly on medical treatment, and that is a government obligation. They paid for it with their arms, their legs, their brains, and their friends' lives.
Mr. Jingozian.
Unlike what the politicians want you to believe, the American people are not stupid. I've been traveling this country for a year now talking to people about this candidacy and our message. Two things I've learned. One, people are a lot smarter than we think they are. And two, people are a lot more concerned and terrified about what's going on. What we need to do is deregulate the drug and medical industry. This will decrease costs, increase availability, but you're not going to see it with 80,000 lobbyists walking around Washington, 2 lobbyists for every pharmaceutical company, and something like 500 former congressmen who are now lobbyists in Washington, peddling products and services that we don't need, adding to the debt, causing more problems down the road. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to break this destructive two-party system now. Thank you.
Dr. Ruwart.
My colleague, Michael Jingozian, is right. We need to deregulate. It's the only way we can bring healthcare costs down. With pharmaceuticals, about 80% of current costs are actually due to regulations that harm us instead of help us. They have taken the drug development time from 5 years to 15 years. And that's just the beginning. We have regulations in every part of the medical sector, every part. And universal health care is not the solution. After all, we still pay, either through inflation or through taxation. We have to lower the cost. And of course, where universal health care has been enacted, such as Britain and Canada, seniors are routinely turned away from life-saving treatment and told to go home and die. And unless they're rich enough to come to another country, they do. Canada, you can wait up to 2 years for cardiac bypass. It's just too long. You'll literally die waiting. In the 90s, when Clinton Care was proposed, my colleagues and I fought that, and most of those colleagues were libertarians. I think this is a libertarian victory because I recognized 80% of the names of those who were fighting that. We should acknowledge that and be proud.
Mr. Kubby.
As a cancer patient, I've had an opportunity to witness our healthcare system here, and I can tell you that the FDA is a big part of the problem. When cancer patients have to sue the federal government just to get the right to use experimental drugs, you know you have a problem. When cancer patients such as myself are told to wait years for this or that drug to be available, you know you have a problem. But when medical patients who are finding real relief under the supervision of their doctors are treated like criminals, humiliated, raided, dragged out of their homes, exposed to serious diseases, bankrupted, treated as common criminals, when you have more people in jail for drug offenses than all of the violent offenses in this country, you have a problem. And I can tell you the name of that problem: the FDA.
Mr. Root.
The answer is the same as it always is. Get government out there, the problem, not the solution. The answer is freedom. The answer is choice. The answer is competition. Do you want the people that ran Hurricane Katrina and the Walter Reed Hospital and the war in Iraq running your health care? The answer is no. In Canada, Belinda Stronach, one of the most powerful and wealthy politicians in the entire country, got breast cancer. And when she was diagnosed, guess where she went to treat it? The United States of America. That's what a great success the Canadian universal health care system is. The answer is deregulation, states' rights, Let states decide how to treat it and come up with the answers. Let individuals buy their policies in any state where you get the best policy at the best price. Decouple the employer from the employee, because nobody works for 30 years and gets a gold watch anymore. So when you want to leave and you have a child that's sick, you take your policy with you. It's yours, you own it. And last but not least, tort reform. Get the lawyers out of the process.
Congressman Barr.
Thank you, Jim. Every so often, I make a 45-mile trip from our home near Atlanta up to a beautiful city called Rome, Georgia. And the reason that I go up there periodically is to have my family doctor prod and poke and pull and take and look inside and look outside at this 59-year-old body. And then he sends me a bill. And it's a big bill, but I pay it. One, because he's a friend, and secondly, I believe whether or not you pay or follow your lawyer's advice, you ought to pay and follow your doctor's advice. But I asked him one day, the last time I was up there just a couple of months ago, I said, Doc, I said, you sent me a bill, and I'm happy to pay it. But how much of that bill represents the fee for your medical services, the things that you and your nurses and your office staff are performing on my behalf, and how much of it is the result of government regulation? And he said almost 50% of what we charge is because of government regulation, and that includes the FDA. And I don't know what FDA you're talking about, whether you're talking about some fairly dumb agency or the Food and Drug Administration, but they're both bad. Get rid of them.
All right, for the next round, we'll start with Dr. Phillies. Assuming you are president, how will you address the marital rights of gays, lesbians, and transgender persons?
I'm proud to be from Massachusetts. I'm proud to be from a state where everyone has equality in marriage, in adoption, in all of the legal rights that are associated with gender issues. Now, having said that, it'd be very easy for me to talk about federalism and states' rights. Number one, Washington, D.C., Congress is the state legislature. I'm the governor. That's how our Constitution works. There's no federalism dodge. I'll ask Congress to repeal the bigoted Defense of Marriage Act. I'll ask Congress to repeal the bigoted Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'll encourage the notion states' rights, the Jim Crow racist states' rights doctrine was wrong when it took away an African American's right to vote. It is wrong when it takes away a homosexual's right to marry. It is wrong when it says states can take away a woman's right to choose.
Mr. Jingozian.
I agree with everything this fine, good-looking guy says. I don't see why it's even an issue. I don't even see why the government is even involved in any of these issues. Who even gave the government authority to even discuss these issues? Well, then what can I say about it?
Well, I mean, again, on behalf of the audience, we thank you, because the quicker the answers, the more questions. Dr. Ruwart.
Well, I agree with a lot of things my colleagues have said. The Defense of Marriage Act would have to go. And of course, marriage should be a private contract between two people. Oftentimes, when we get married, we don't really know what legal contract we've signed until we try to get a divorce. And it can change. It can change from state to state, and it can change from year to year. I think a contract between two people would solve a lot of problems, just like a partnership agreement would. That's the reason we have contracts in this country, so we know what we're getting into up front. I think this is the way we should be pursuing our marriage. And then every individual would have the choice whether to have it as a religious service or a civil service, or no service at all, simply going into your lawyer's office and signing the papers. It should be up to the individuals involved. After all, it's a very private matter, isn't it?
Mr. Kubby.
You know, I'm actually perplexed by how it is that the government feels that it has the authority to look up skirts and trousers and decide who gets to marry and who doesn't. Thank you.
I'm tempted to just let you applaud for the rest of this 1 minute, but let's just keep moving here. Mr. Root.
You know, when I'm with my male friends and we're talking about marriage, I always, when this topic comes up, I always ask them the same question. Can you believe that gays in this country actually want to be married? You can have it. Now, just kidding. I've been married 17 wonderful years. I love my wife. I understand why they want it so badly. My answer is very simple. Ladies and gentlemen, it's none of the government's business at any stage of this country to define marriage. Period. Thank you.
Congressman Barr.
Jim, thank you. I stand for two reasons. One, because my rear end is killing me from sitting up here in this very uncomfortable stool. But also to stand before you as the author of the Defense of Marriage Act and to tell you eye to eye, face to face, as I told a group of outright libertarians when I met for 45 minutes with them in Reno, Nevada, back in October at a conference, after listening to them and hearing from them firsthand the damage to their lives and the lives of other Americans that have been wrought by the abuse of that provision and those provisions in the Defense of Marriage Act that purport to define marriage by the federal government, which has been used as a hammer on individuals seeking to enter this country and who are in this country to deny them rights that they ought to have. And as I promised them then, and as I promise you now, I will work to repeal that provision of law.
Senator Gravel.
The word marriage is a secular term. It's really been appropriated by all religions throughout civilization. And really, what is marriage? Marriage is a commitment of two human beings, a commitment of love between two human beings. They can be male and female, they can be two females, they can be two males, they can be transgender. But really what it is, it's a commitment of love between two human beings. If this world needs something, it needs more love.
We're closing in on our last little bit of time here, and we've had a good policy discussion, but I think it's important, based on all the questions that I had a chance to read, to ask this question, which is reflective of quite a few, and I'll begin with Mr. Jingozian. How will your campaign help the Libertarian Party?
Very good. I'm glad we're talking about that. My mentor is Harry Brown, and Harry Brown didn't focus on selling the libertarian message to libertarians. He enrolled all the American people, and that's what we intend to do. As I see it, libertarian values fall into two categories. Those that appeal to all independent voters and those that are specific to libertarians. What I'm focusing on in our campaign are those issues that all Americans have in common. 80% of Americans are disenchanted with the two-party system. 70% of Americans think this country is in the wrong direction. Another 75% think the two-party system is broken. Yet the most we can muster is 1.1% of the vote. It's disgraceful as a libertarian. And this is why I'm running for President of the United States, and is to deliver the message of unity and the libertarian message, getting out of the war in Iraq, bringing back habeas corpus, closing the Department of Homeland Security, getting rid of the Patriot Act. These are issues that all Americans have in common. Thank you.
Dr. Ruwart.
Well, first of all, I'd like to get more votes for the Libertarian Party, and I think this is the year that we can do that. That's because there are a lot of women who want to vote for a woman and aren't going to get that opportunity. The way has been prepared for us, and I think running a woman, a principled woman, a libertarian woman at the top of our ticket will make that possible. In addition, I'd like to help our local and state candidates get votes. And the way I would do that, since I've been active with Ron Paul since 1988, he endorsed my book, Healing Our World, wrote me a letter to President Bush when I wanted to become the FDA commissioner so I could do a de facto privatization of that industry, or that agency. And I've been involved in his meetup groups. I'm hoping that I can encourage the Ron Paul activists to vote for our state and local candidates because there simply are not enough Ron Paul Republicans running. In addition, I think that it may be time to invite some of the activists, the Ron Paul activists, into the party, and only a member of the movement who respects and is supportive of Ron Paul can do that. Thank you.
Mr. Kubby.
Thank you. You know, this party has really grown phenomenally in the past few years. Libertarianism used to be a word that was confused with libraries. And now I see everyone lining up to proclaim that they are a libertarian, and I fully expect one day soon I will see a book that says, "I've always been a libertarian," by Hillary Clinton. The truth of the matter is we've been leaning too far for the right. We've had too many conservative candidates for the Libertarian Party. We need to have a real fighter. We need to have someone that will pick up on the Ron Paul revolution and give them a revolutionary change. We're not going to get any change from Barack Obama. We're not going to get anything but more grief from insane McCain. We need someone that's going to fight for your freedom.
Mr. Root.
The whole issue is, number one, voters, constituencies, and number two, fundraising. We haven't had enough of either one. Here's what I bring to the table. Number one, I'm the only small businessman in modern political history if I get your nomination. I'm going after 27 million small businessmen and women. They've got the money for our contributions to run a dynamite campaign. They're the ones that can make the difference for the Libertarian Party. We've got the Small Business Initiative in my campaign that's going to fight tooth and nail for every small businessman and woman in this country. And you know who else? Independent contractors, real estate brokers, stockbrokers, insurance brokers, mortgage brokers, people that work on performance and don't get a safe paycheck each week. They understand it's their money, it's not the government's money. That's our audience. Number two, education reform. Homeschool parents and parents looking to take control of their children's life. And number three, 12 million online poker enthusiasts in this country who consider me a celebrity. They're coming to the LP.
Congressman Barr.
Thank you, Jim. Since I formally joined the Libertarian Party in 2006, I have traveled the length and the breadth of this great land and worked with and supported Libertarian parties at the federal, state, and local level. And what I hear as I travel from California to Connecticut to the heartland of America, and even in my great home state of Georgia in our 4th district, which I've been delighted and honored to represent on the LNC for the last couple of years, is that we need a change, but we need somebody who can reach the American voter in language and ways that they can understand, that can go to the American people and say, I have been in the belly of the beast. I have been in Washington. I have survived, and this country too can survive the two-party system, which has held America captive for decades and decades. And we do that by recognizing, not as the moderator in a debate that I had a few days ago indicated, and that is, he seemed to think that we're in the cusp of a libertarian moment. We are on the cusp of a libertarian era. Let us seize it, and I want to help you lead that effort.
Senator Gravel.
Yeah, would you repeat the question again, please?
The question is, how will your campaign help the Libertarian Party?
Well, you judge people by their actions, not by the talk. Who can walk the talk? I was a senator for 12 years. I was Speaker of the House in Alaska. In the first 4 years that I was in the Senate, I forced an end to the draft. I stopped the nuclear testing on the... You're cutting into my time. I stopped the nuclear testing in the North Pacific. I capped the number of plants that were subsidized, nuclear plants that were subsidized. I brought about the authorization of the Alaska pipeline, and I risked going to jail by releasing the Pentagon Papers. Now, I can only tell you that I did those 4 things in the first 4 years as a freshman in the United States Senate, fighting the Democrats, fighting the Republicans, and fighting the White House. Now, if you want some leadership, I'm prepared to give it to you. And I'm prepared to give it to you under the leadership of the Libertarian Party. Freedom, freedom, freedom.
Dr. Phillies.
What can my campaign do for our party? Can I be elected president? That's up to you, the American voter. It's your free choice. You don't have to obey what you hear on left-wing television and from right-wing hate radio. You can make an independent decision. To my fellow delegates, I'm not going to make fabulous promises, but But I'm also not going to talk about what I might do if I became the nominee. I'm not going to talk about what I might do to reach out to small businessmen or might do to reach out to Ron Paul folks. I've already reached out direct mail electronics to thousands of Ron Paul supporters. What am I going to do? What is my realistic objective? I am hard at work building our party. I've got volunteers. I've got the campaign disc you're all being given tomorrow. I've got press relations. I'm doing all the things a campaign should do. And I promise you I will campaign with your candidates and support libertarian candidates and get them elected and build stronger parties.
If the panelists and Emily and Barr will humor me, we can squeeze in one rapid-fire question and then do the closing statements. So in the spirit of a rapid-fire question, I'll begin with Dr. Ruwart. Do you favor the repeal of all federal gun laws, beginning with Franklin Roosevelt's tax on machine guns?
Yes.
Let's not slow down.
Well, I would elaborate a little bit more on yes. I think real freedom is less likely to come from the Congress and more likely to come from Smith & Wesson.
Mr. Root.
I would ask a simple question. What part of the Second Amendment do the bureaucrats not understand? Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be brief. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no better argument for the rights of American-owned guns than a Jewish American whose relatives died in the Holocaust. The reason they died is the first thing Hitler did was take away their guns.
Congressman Barr.
Thank you, Jim. Wayne earlier mentioned Charlton Heston. I had the honor of serving. I served continuously on the NRA board, but I had the honor of serving under Chuck Heston during the time that he headed the NRA. And as he said, and as I say, and as I dare say, I probably speak for everybody here, the Second Amendment is the First Amendment, and we need to retain it, we need to strengthen it, we need to ensure that laws at the federal or the state level, such as the unconstitutional D.C. gun ban, which is currently up before the U.S. Supreme Court, despite efforts by the Bush administration to send it back down, we need to remove those laws and reinvigorate the Second Amendment and do as Charlton Heston said and make it once again the First Amendment.
Senator Gravel.
I would leave the Second Amendment where it is, and I think it's inviolate. I don't think the American people would ever change it. I do believe that the American people should have the opportunity to deal with this issue. I don't think I'm all that smart. I think the American people have greater wisdom to deal with this issue. And so why, if we're afraid of the American people making decisions, all decisions that affect their lives, then there's really something wrong with us as libertarians.
Dr. Phillies.
The Second Amendment guarantees the right of all citizens to keep and bear arms. That's so they can participate in the militia, the armed citizenry, all citizens keeping and bearing arms. Having said that, I'm running for president, not American dictator. I can lobby Congress. I can't make them do a thing. I can, however, insist that my secretary of...
Mr. Jingozian.
I own a handgun, and no one's taking it away from me.
Okay, that completes our rapid-fire round. I will now go to closing statements, and we'll begin with the same sequence that we began the opening statements, with 1 minute or maybe 50 seconds, according to Barb and Emily's calculations, from Congressman Barr.
Jim, thank you. We spent a great deal of today going over the Libertarian Party platform that will sustain us and set in motion our goal and our vision for the next 2 years. There is not, the following word does not appear in the Libertarian Party platform, and it is not a part of our vision or our agenda, and that is the word fear. We need to make sure the American people understand that no longer should fear be driving public policy. Courage should be, and that is what the Libertarian Party stands for. Many, many years ago, the philosopher Dante Alighieri said that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in times of grave moral crisis, remain neutral. This is a time of grave moral crisis. The Libertarian Party never has remained neutral. I do not remain neutral. Let us take on the powers that be. Let us fight them. Let us destroy the mechanism that is itself destroying the country, and that is big government. Make me your nominee to do that, and I will help lead that effort.
We're going to have to keep it fast now, folks, because C-SPAN is even more merciless than Dante. Senator Gravel.
There's a mention of Cicero. Cicero gave us a great definition of freedom. What it is, it's participation in power. What is the power that we have in this country as a democracy? It's the power that we give away on election day for somebody to make laws that we have to obey or go to jail. What I advocate is that power, we don't have to give it away. Leave them alone. Let's go ahead and give that power to the American people so they can vote on all the issues that affect their lives. And then you'll see a government shrink. Then you'll see all the things that we aspire to, because the people will make the decision and they will be empowered. We want to change the paradigm of human governance, and it's a national initiative that will do that.
Dr. Phillies.
Fellow libertarians, we're all great speakers. We're all good libertarians. They're all good looking. Having said that, why should you choose me? I'm a long-time activist. I declared 2 years ago, my skeletons are all out of the pocket. You know where I stand. I'm not going to talk about building a better party. I'm already doing it. I've already got local groups across the country. I've already got internet outreach. My press releases already go out to 17,000 destinations regularly. I'm doing all the things our party should do, and I'm doing it to build for every state party in this room stronger parties from coast to coast, Alaska, Hawaii, and beyond. Thank you.
Mr. Jingozian.
Running this government is like running a business. I'm a CEO. My latest business, Angel Vision Technologies, is rated the 120th fastest growing company in the United States. We're a media company, an interactive media company. We handle the marketing for 1,750 clients, most of which are the leaders of their field. We have the ability, the unique ability to get our message out in front of the American people in a way that resonates with them, in a way that motivates them to take action for the cause of liberty. I want to thank you here for the opportunity to speak in front of you. Thank you so much for being here for the cause of liberty and the cause of freedom. There's nothing more important than that. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ruwart.
I think I'd like to start by reminding us of our victories, because sometimes they go so unnoticed. I've been campaigning since the early 1980s as a Libertarian candidate, and I've seen a big shift in the way our message is received. It used to be that when we talked about ending the income tax and replacing it with nothing, that we were booed off the stage. We were considered to be somewhat kooky when we talked about ending the war on drugs. But now these ideas have become mainstream. People even in Congress, judges are talking about these ideas. It is time for us to strike while the iron is hot, not step back, not falter, not flinch. I hope that you'll consider me as your candidate, and I hope that you will join whichever candidate you choose to be the best campaign we've ever had. Thank you.
Mr. Kubby.
For years, the police told us if you don't like the law, change it. My friends and I changed the law, and we immediately became targets of the police, the prosecutors, the federal government, every agency alphabet you can imagine. And you know what? Every single one of them was prosecuted for passing the law. I was prosecuted after I passed the law. And I have worked, and I have a track record that no other candidate for president can match. Every other candidate has been busy taking freedom from you through more and more legislation. I'm the only candidate that has written, helped to write, and pass a law that recognize new freedoms, not just on the state level with 215, but locally in my own community with Measure G. Thank you.
Mr. Root.
Ladies and gentlemen, what this party needs is energy, spirit, passion, dynamic communicator. Raise your hands. How many of you believe I have energy? Show of hands. How many of you believe that I've got passion? Now compare my energy and my passion to an employee of the Department of Motor Vehicles. That's the message. It's big government and federal bureaucracy against a small businessman. You know what else this party needs? A fighter. a New York street fighter. And I'll tell you something, my hero is Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill once said, never, ever, 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 ever give up. And I will never stop fighting from coast to coast, from east to west, from north to south, for this party to elect libertarians from every level of government, from top to bottom. God bless you and good night. Thank you.
Let's hear it for that legendary New York street fighter, Winston Churchill. But listen, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank our 7 panelists for coming up here, and this concludes the Libertarian Party debate.
You've shown me and the other libertarians where you stand. I had my doubts, but I wonder if you're in Vegas. Folks from our take a picture of the two of us. I've gotten, I think, almost all the presidential candidates. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Press the big button. Do it one more time. Apparently it takes a full second after 1, 2, 3. Big one. When you're 70 years. That's pretty good. Do it? Let's see what it looks like. See if you're up there. I let everyone approve. Yeah, but it's good. Somebody's got to push the wheelchair. I don't know about that. You look dandy. You look all right. Thank you.
Should have let us get him to do some jumping jacks or something. Try sitting up there. I'm sure it was torture. You met her. Yes.
That's just a stop. Yeah, I know, but it's